Verses 17 to 21. It should seem the ship Paul and his companions were embarked in for Jerusalem attended him on purpose, and stayed or moved as he pleased, for when he came to Miletus, he went ashore, and tarried these so long as to send for the elders of Ephesus to come to him thither, for if he had gone up to Ephesus, he could never have got away from them. These elders, or presbyters, some think, were those 12 who received the Holy Ghost by Paul's hands. Ch 19:6. But, besides these, it is probable that Timothy had ordained other elders there for the service of that church, and the country about. These Paul sent for, that he might instruct and encourage them to go on in the work to which they had laid their hands. And what instructions he gave to them they would give to the people under their charge. It is a very pathetic and practical discourse with Paul here takes leave of these elders, and has in it much of the excellent spirit of this good man. He appeals to them concerning both his life and doctrine, all the time he had been in and about Ephesus. v18 You know after what manner I have been with you, and how I have done the work of an apostle among you. He mentions this as a confirmation of his commission and consequently of the doctrine he had preached among them. They all knew him to be a man of serious, gracious, heavenly spirit, that he was no designing self-seeking man, as seducers are. He could not have been carried on with so much evenness and constancy in his services and sufferings, but by the power of divine grace. The temper of his mind, and the tenor both of his preaching and conversation, were such as plainly proved that God was with him of a truth, and that he was actuated and animated by a better spirit than his own. He likewise makes this reference to his own conduct as an instruction to them, in whose hands the work was now left, to follow his example. You know after what manner I have been with you, how I have conducted myself as a minister, in like manner be you with those that are committed to your charge when I am gone. Philosophy 4:9. What you have seen in me that is good do. His spirit and conversation were excellent and exemplary. They knew after what manner he had been among them, and how he had had his conversation towards them, in simplicity and godly sincerity. 2 Cor 1:12. How holily, justly, and unblameably he behaved himself, and how gentle he was towards them. He had conducted himself well all along, from the very first day that he came into Asia at all seasons. The manner of his entering in among them was such as nobody could find fault with. He appeared from the first day. They knew him to be a man that aimed not only to do well, but to do good, wherever he came. He was a man that was consistent with himself, and all of a piece. Take him where you would, he was the same at all seasons. He did not turn with the wind nor change with the weather, but was uniform like a die, which, throw it which way you will, lights on a square side. He had made it his business to serve the Lord, to promote the honor of God and the interest of Christ and his kingdom among them. He never served himself, nor made himself a servant of men, of their lusts and humors, nor was he a time server, but he made it his business to serve the Lord. In his ministry, in his whole conversation, he proved himself what he wrote himself, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ. He had done his work with all humility of mind, meta posse este pinaphrosynes, that is, in all works of condescension, modesty, and self-abasement. Though he was one that God had put a great deal of honor upon, and done a great deal of good by, yet he never took state upon him, nor kept people at a distance, but conversed as freely and familiarly with the meanest, for their good, as if he had stood upon a level with them. He was willing to stoop to any service, and to make himself and his labors as cheap as they could desire. Note, those that would in any office serve the Lord acceptably to him, and profitably to others, must do it with all humility of mind. He had always been very tender, affectionate, and compassionate. Among them, he had served the Lord with many tears. Paul was herein like his master, often in tears. In his praying, he wept and made supplication. In his preaching, what he had told them before he told them again, even weeping. Philosophy 3:18. In his concern for them, though his acquaintance with them was but of a late standing, yet so near did they lie to his heart that he wept with those that wept, and mingled his tears with theirs upon every occasion, which was very endearing. He had struggled with many difficulties among them. He went on in his work in the face of much opposition, many temptations, trials of his patience and courage, such discouragements as perhaps were sometimes temptations to him, as to Jeremiah in a like case to say, I will not speak any more in the name of the Lord, J 20:8, 9. These befell him by the lying in wait of the Jews, who still were plotting some mischief or other against him. Note, those are the faithful servants of the Lord that continue to serve him in the midst of troubles and perils, that care not what enemies they make, so that they can but approve themselves to their master, and make him their friend. Paul's tears were owing to his temptations, his afflictions helped to excite his good affections. His preaching was likewise such as it should be, v. 20:21. He came to Ephesus to preach the gospel of Christ among them, and he had been faithful both to them and to him that appointed him. He was a plain preacher, and one that delivered his message so as to be understood. This is intimated in 2 words, I have shown you, and have taught you. He did not amuse them with nice speculations, nor lead them into, and then lose them in, the clouds of lofty notions and expressions, but he showed them the plain truths of the gospel, which were of the greatest consequence and importance, and taught them as children are taught. I have shown you the right way to happiness, and taught you to go in it. He was a powerful preacher, which is intimated in his testifying to them. He preached as one upon oath, that was himself fully assured of the truth of what he preached and was desirous to convince them of it and to influence and govern them by it. He preached the gospel, not as a hawker proclaims news in the street, it is all one to him whether it be true or false, but as a conscientious witness gives in his evidence at the bar, with the utmost seriousness and concern. Paul preached the gospel as a testimony to them if they received it, but as a testimony against them if they rejected it. He was a profitable preacher, one that in all his preaching aimed at doing good to those he preached to. He studied that which was profitable unto them, which had a tendency to make them wise and good, wiser and better, to inform their judgments and reform their hearts and lives. He preached ta symphoronta, such things as brought with them divine light and heat and power to their souls. It is not enough not to preach that which is hurtful, which leads into error or hardens in sin, but we must preach that which is profitable. We do all things, dearly beloved, for your edifying. Paul aimed to preach not that which was pleasing, but that which was profitable, and to please only in order to profit. God is said to teach his people to profit, Isa 48:17. Those teach for God that teach people to profit. He was a painstaking preacher, very industrious and indefatigable in his work. He preached publicly, and from house to house. He did not confine himself to a corner when he had opportunity of preaching in the great congregation, nor did he confine himself to the congregation when there was occasion for private and personal instruction. He was neither afraid nor ashamed to preach the gospel publicly, nor did he grudge to bestow his pains privately, among a few, when there was occasion for it. He preached publicly to the flock that came together into the green pastures, and went from house to house to seek those that were weak and had wandered, and did not think that the one would excuse him from the other. Ministers should in their private visits, and as they go from house to house, discourse of those things which they have taught publicly, repeat them, inculcate them, and explain them, if it be needful, asking, have you understood all these things? And, especially, they should help persons to apply the truth to themselves in their own case. He was a faithful preacher. He not only preached that which was profitable, but he preached everything that he thought might be profitable, and kept back nothing, though the preaching of it might either cost him more pains or be disobliging to some and expose him to their ill will. He declined not preaching whatever he thought might be profitable, though it was not fashionable, nor to some acceptable. He did not keep back reproofs, when they were necessary and would be profitable, for fear of offending, nor did he keep back the preaching of the cross, though he knew it was to the Jews a stumbling block and to the Greeks foolishness, as the Roman missionaries in China lately did. He was a Catholic preacher. He testified both to the Jews and also to the Greeks. Though he was born and bred a Jew, and had an entire affection for that nation, and was trained up in their prejudices against the Gentiles, yet he did not therefore confine himself to the Jews and avoid the Gentiles, but preached as readily to them as to the Jews, and conversed as freely with them. And, on the other hand, though he was called to be the apostle of the Gentiles, and the Jews had an implacable enmity against him upon that score, had done him many an ill turn, and here at Ephesus were continually plotting against him, yet he did not therefore abandon them as reprobates, but continued to deal with them for their good. Ministers must preach the gospel with impartiality, for they are ministers of Christ for the universal church.